Hello, my babies. Welcome to issue 58 of Titular Characters. I am your adorable host, Eva Webb, and in this issue, we're featuring the incomparable Ariana Maher. Ariana is a queer Brazilian comic book letterer based in the Pacific Northwest. She is a freelance letterer for Marvel Comics, DC Comics, and numerous independent comics. Her recent work includes Demon Days X-Men, Silk, Crush and Lobo, Critical Role Vox Machina Origins, and Marvel Voices Pride. This is going to be so much fun.
Mm-hmm.
How are you, Ariana?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I am having the best Sunday. You would not believe it. Everything has just been amazing today. So I understand you have some really, really exciting stuff going out for Pride Month. Can you tell me about it?
Yes, this is, I think, the first time that both Marvel and DC are putting out anthologies for Pride Month featuring, writers and artists and creators from the community and them telling stories, particularly focused around, LGBTQA characters. And so that's really exciting. And I get to do two stories in the DC Pride anthology. I get to letter them. One is a Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy story, and another is a story featured around the question. And I get to work with some of the creators that I really adore working with or haven't had a chance to work with, and I finally get to. And then for Marvel's Voices Pride anthology, I got a chance to letter the whole thing, all of the stories within it. And it was really, really exciting. Like the whole time I've been working in this past 2 months or so, I thought, oh man, this is really my job. I get to letter all of these cool comics and see them all come together. So yeah, I hope people will check it out and get to enjoy them because I really, really hope they sell well and that I get to letter both and like stories in both anthologies again next year because this has been great.
That sounds like a ton of fun. So for the people listening who don't know, you are a letterer. You work on some really, really big and exciting titles. You've done everything. What's your creative origin story? How did you get to where you are today?
I was living in Japan, working as an interpreter and translator for the city of Kawasaki. I had been spending years studying Japanese in order to get to that level, and I was working what I figured was my dream job. And it was really getting to me. I was feeling kind of lonely out there. And the work was really grueling and pretty thankless. But I ended up like getting back into reading Western comics while I was in Japan. There was this one little comic book store in Akihabara that later moved to Asakusa area and called Blister. And I would just go out there and I'd pick up the latest issues of like X Factor or whatever and read those. And I started just getting more involved in comics like I did when I was a little girl. And around that point, I started fiddling around with Adobe suite of programs like Adobe Illustrator and stuff because design was pretty interesting to me. And a friend was doing a little comic project of her own, and I was like, "Hey, I'll help. I want to learn how to letter, so let me letter these pages." So it was like a little thing on DeviantArt, and I realized this was fun, and I just spent a good 6 months just reading every day, every article I could find. There wasn't a lot of articles at that time, but Jim Campbell, Blambot, Comic Craft had a site called Balloon Tales. And there was only like maybe 2 books, one by Todd Klein and one by Richard Starkings that was about lettering. And so I just read everything I could get my hands on because I don't consider myself good at drawing. I don't consider myself good at writing, but I really got into design, like digital design. And that's when I taught myself lettering. And from there, I started working on projects, and I've had some ups and I've had some downs. But one of the most consistent projects I've worked in the past decade has been with my friend Jade Kasi, who works in the studio called Little Foolery, and she does a web comic called Sphere Theory. So I've been lettering her stories for years and years, and that slowly evolved me into a more refined letterer, because she was very exacting on what she wanted. And so we would always go back and forth creatively until I would get the lettering how she liked. And it was fantastic. I learned so much in the process that when I think I was halfway through my current career, it was 5 years in, I was hired out of the blue by Sloan Leong to do a project for Image. And that bled into another project, into another project, into another project with all these other different creators, because I do a good job in one book. They recommend me to someone else by word of mouth, and so on and so forth, until I ended up last year. I was working at my day job I was working as a software tester at Nintendo, and at night I was lettering. So I was doing a good 60 to 90 hour work weeks, juggling both jobs, almost not because I had to as much as I wanted to, because I loved lettering, but I had to feed myself. And I got an email out of the blue. It's like, hey, do you want to join the virtual calligraphy team and letter Marvel books? And I knew instantly I was going to quit my day job. And it's been a wild year, but I'm so glad I made that choice.
That is amazing. Um, so, what tools do you use when you letter? What is a modern professional letterer? What does their toolbox look like?
It's a pretty limited toolbox when you look at it, because there's, for artists, like, there's a wide array of both physical and digital tools that they can, and programs they can dive into. But for letterers, you end up having to use the industry standard, not because they're always the best tool for the job, but because you have to be able to export in the format you need to get the book published. And it's limited by the Adobe suite. So Photoshop, InDesign, and Illustrator. Illustrator is the main tool for the letterer. If you learn everything you need to know in Illustrator, you're pretty good for a while, until you realize having a background in InDesign and having a better understanding of Photoshop, it makes you far better in the long run. But like, if you are interested in becoming a letterer, you have to dive into the Adobe suite. There are other programs like the Affinity design programs and stuff that are starting to gain a lot of momentum, but they're still limited in a few key aspects that we can't make it a new industry standard, even though it's more affordable. So, yeah.
So, one thing I keep hearing about is just all the crazy, unexpected stuff that letterers are expected to do. It's not just putting the boxes on the page, but someone told me last night that their letterer does production layouts for their whole book.
Oh yeah, that's why you need the InDesign experience. I do, in Marvel, we do production layouts. We are in DC, we just send in pages and those get, accepted, and there's a different part of production that puts them together. I think a few other companies do it that way, and then a few other companies are like, can you just send us, everything combined, the finished production pages? And like Image, you just send it all in. It all really depends on the publisher and what they need. And as long as they give you the requirements, it makes it easier to adapt to that. So I'm used to either setting up pages just to send them the lettering files, or putting the whole production together in InDesign and updating it if there's any changes, and then setting it all up with the print requirements needed. It's definitely something I had to learn on my own from scratch. And it was very difficult to learn because InDesign is a different beast from Illustrator. But it's pretty great in the long run once you can figure it out, because it makes everything easier. Now I can set up everything I need to finish a book really quickly, so that I'm ready to go. As soon as they send me pages and script, I can get it done as quick as possible. But when I started out, I had no idea what to do. It would take me weeks what I can do now in 2 days.
That's incredible. Do you do it like with macros and keystrokes and pre-programmed stuff? How's the workflow work?
The workflow is interesting. What I have now, especially in the past year since I've gone full-time letterer, I've really refined my process. I've done a few things new and differently that I really should write down so I can share with other letterers who might not have this available. But like, I learned in Illustrator, you can set up actions to do something that you do repeatedly. So you can set up an action to align the text with a word bubble, set up an action to outline a text so you can start using it as a sound effect and manipulating it that way. You can do an action to export it into a specific file format so that it can be read by other users. You can do, I think I have more than a dozen actions or so. And then all of those I managed to program into a I mean, if you look it up on Amazon, it's kind of a wonky thing. It's called a Genovation keypad. It's just like this blank keypad, and you can just conform it to however you need. So I programmed each key into a different action in Illustrator. And every time I'm doing this repeatable action, like copy and then paste in place or something like that, I just press one button, press the next button, and it's done. So I'm starting to adapt into a process that does that. With InDesign, I don't need to do too much with scripts because it's mostly just I need to set up all the art pages on one layer, set up all the lettering on another layer, and go from there. With Illustrator, I'm constantly setting up different templates specific to their projects, and those templates have like all the different text and dialogue and resources that I use and use and use again for those specific titles. Just like it's a difference between lettering a House of X book as opposed to Spider-Man. There's different types of fonts you're using. There's different types of dialogue. I've set up all of my dialogue into different actions, into different keys in the keypad. So if I'm just using regular dialogue and then one word has to be bolded, I just highlight that word and I press a key to bold the text instead of going into the menu, choosing bold and making it that way. It saves me maybe 2 seconds of my time, but if you mount it up, it ends up I'm saving myself hours of time from all the different actions I'm doing quickly instead of after several keystrokes. So it's a process. It takes a lot of refinement, and then each person is different. Each person's approach is different, and I think as long as it works for them, it's brilliant. Like the way I letter is probably really different than how Hassan letters or DC letters or Aditya letters. Like everyone kind of approaches it differently, but still manages to get to the same place in the end.
You know, it's really interesting. I come from a sort of a graphic design and technical web sort of background. And every time I've ever worked with other people who use Illustrator, You get three people who use Illustrator in the same room or on the same project, and all of a sudden there's four different ways of doing things, and nobody understands what the other person did. Do you ever have
Yeah.
trouble with collaborations there as far as book layouts and lettering and stuff like that?
Um, Not really. The closest I've had is that from time to time, a letterer or myself or someone else has to take a break or has to do something, and they can't cover a book, and the book needs to go out. So they'll reach out to another letterer to help them out and get this book out the door. Before I joined the VC team for the Marvel books, I think there was only two occasions. There was Ed Brissom, but he was becoming a comic writer at the time. But before then, he was a letterer for a book, and he had to travel out to Europe for a big show. And but the team had just finished. We're just finishing the pages, and it was down to the line, and they didn't get it to him in time. So he sent me his lettering template, and it gave me all the stuff I needed to just letter the issue for him. So I did the work and got the credit and got paid for that one issue, and then the series goes right back to him at the next issue, and so on. And I think one time I was not available for a week due to, I think I was out that week to go to Rose City Comic Con, and there was an issue of, I think it was James Bond, and I couldn't cover it at the time. I was too close to the line, so I reached out. I talked to the editor, and he reached out to Hassan, and he took over my book for one issue. So I just packaged up my template and sent it to him. And it was pretty easy to do because a lot of letters do get their fonts from the same area, their licensed fonts from the same locations. There's like two major font companies, Comic Craft and Blambot. And those two companies, well, studios, pretty much make the majority of comic book fonts, other than like proprietary owned comic book fonts. And so it was pretty easy to send him the packages like, do you have these fonts? Good. Okay, go for it. And so he did an issue for me, and then the series returned to me to finish off. So and then when I joined Marvel's books with the VC team, if I'm away for a week, like recently I got vaccinated, so I had to go to Detroit. Joe Caramanga picked up my book for a week, and it helped me out a whole lot because I just did not have the time to focus on that book because I was away.
Joe Caramanga has the greatest Twitter feed. He is so much fun to follow.
Oh yeah, chatting with him on our work chat it's the same thing. It's talking about donuts and Krispy Kreme.
Nice.
He's gonna get a donut. He's gonna make it to 125 donuts this year. He's gonna do it. I have full faith in him.
That is amazing.
But yeah, it's really great working with those guys, especially because I've admired a lot of their work for so long. Like getting to have a coworker like Joe Sabino as well, Clayton. Like all these guys are amazing. They're really, really cool guys. And I'm lucky I get to work with them. But it's so weird that I have never met any of them, even my boss, Chris, in person, because I live on the other side of the country.
That's really interesting. How does being fully remote affect your collaborations, just in general?
Um, Unlike a lot of other industries, I think the current state of the comic industry now is well tailored for remote work. Going into an office is not as creative a space as being in the safety of your own home, your own studio, and working with your own methods. And so being in a crowded room would just kind of be overwhelming, especially for people who can easily be distracted when they need to focus on creative work. For me, I've been technically a remote worker ever since I started a lot of lettering professionally, because even when I just had my dinky little laptop and was lettering, I think my very first professional project, I was in Brazil, living with my mom, for a year. And I started on working on a project in my little laptop while my collaborators were in America and Canada. And it was just surreal. So I get to work with people from all over the place, like either down the street from me or to the other side of the world. Uh, and it's really neat to be able to connect with people and make things creatively with people this way. It's just weird not getting to meet them in person. And it's also a little awkward when I show up at a convention. And I still remember I went up to Yoshi Yoshitani's table right after we finished doing Zatanna and the House of Secrets, which was a graphic novel for DC. And I went up and I'm like, I didn't know what to say. So I was like, oh, hi, I'm your letterer. And she's like, for that project? Because it wasn't announced yet. And it's like, yeah, for that project. It's like we never see each other's faces. We don't know each other's voice. Sometimes we don't even know who each other are. All we see is the medium and the art, the script, and we go from there. I know a lot of writers will end up writing a paragraph or two into their script, introducing themselves to their artist because, this is their chance to actually meet them. And a lot of the communication will go through editors, but I think that is both that can be a big boon because that smooths out the path between collaborators if they have one point of contact as opposed to everyone all talking at once in the room. Because it's kind of like the project goes in stages. You start with the writer and then to the artist and then to the colorist and letterer. You start bringing people in and building on that collaboration through a backbone of an editor is really great.
And I imagine it helps working for a company like Marvel or DC that's been doing remote work for, 30, 40 years now?
Yeah. It might be bad luck to talk about the pandemic, but ever since it started, it's like, this is probably going to be fine. It's probably not going to, like, in a home work balance kind of thing, as long as I stay inside, which I have to do for work. It really did not change too much for me because at that point I had just quit my day job. I was no longer going into an office, and my time was my own to tackle projects. And remote work for comics creatives, I don't think is too much the challenge. Getting to see people again is an exciting element that I hope we get to enjoy again soon.
Yeah, I really miss conventions myself.
Yeah.
What do you aim to accomplish when you letter a book?
When I started out, my very first project, it was for an image book. It was not super popular. The creative team didn't have an editor, so it was a pretty difficult deal overall, to the point that it kind of burnt me out quickly. And I kind of was really lucky to start working with my friend on her project at Sphere Theory, because it revived my love of lettering, when at first I thought, no, I'm not good enough for this. But it was a difficult time because when I started on my first project, I thought my goal was to letter for the reader. And if the reader doesn't like it, I failed. And each issue of that mini series that I lettered, there was one reviewer on IGN who would just say, oh, the writing's great, the art is great, the lettering sucks.
Oh, wow.
And it's like, I was devastated. It's like, oh, these choices I made were bad choices. Looking back on it, I don't think it was really that bad. They were definitely kind of looking for something to pick apart, to like bite into, because it makes for a more interesting article. And I was like, okay. But when I was doing it at the time, I was devastated. I was like, oh no, I tried to do this thing and try to letter a book, and I'm failing spectacularly. I don't know what I'm doing. Oh my gosh. But so I go to the creative team and it's like, so this creative choice I made for this character, should I change it up? What should I do? And they're like, no, we like it. We like that. And then I realized I wasn't lettering for the reader. I was lettering for the creative team. As long as the creative team likes the result and are proud of the result, that's what matters to me. So now when I do a book and the editor says, great job, then that's all the praise I need. If someone doesn't like my work out there, that's totally fine, because everyone's going to see my work in a different way or not notice my work at all because I'm a letterer. But that's okay, because the creative team I worked with are happy with what I did. The vision they had for the book, I was able to help get that result for them. And sometimes I can go with some wild ideas and it turns out great. I just started working on a big project. The first issue just came out this week, and it was called Crush and Lobo. It's with DC Comics. Andrea Shea is the editor, and it's got the most amazing creative team. I won't go too much into it, but the writer and editor would send me these ideas in the script to be like, Ariana, do this, or it'll be in the review, in the notes for the revisions. It'll be like, hey, could you add a sound effect like this? And I would try to be as extra as possible. I would try to really push myself because I wanted to see how far I could push myself. And when the editor comes back and she's like, this, I love this, this is good, then I'm happy. I'm proud of it. I don't need to see how the book reviews or how people respond to it, because I know I accomplished my goal. I contributed to the creative team and they like the result. And that's all it is for me.
So here's my favorite question to ask letterers. Is good lettering invisible?
It's complicated because, I'm sure all letters say it's complicated, but lettering isn't an invisible art because your eyes are constantly on it. When you're reading a comic book, you're reading through our help. We're the ones who are presenting this work to your eyes so that you know what the script says. So you're seeing the artwork, of course, but just as much time you're spending with reading the book. And so as long as you can read a book to start to finish and you never pause and be like, I don't understand what this book is trying to say to me. I don't understand what the order is, or a joke falls flat or something, or the pacing just feels off, then the lettering hasn't been effective in conveying that. There are other elements of a book that can succeed or fail in telling the story, but the lettering is kind of what brings it all together. It's that part that sets the beat, the placement of the text and how you read it across the page sets the pace of the reader enjoying the story. And if you place things incorrectly, if your vision for the design doesn't meld with the story it's trying to tell, the reader will pick up on that, if not consciously, then unconsciously, and it will harm their enjoyment of the book. That's why a lot of people can enjoy a comic, but if the lettering is bad, they have a hard time reading through it, and they might not know why. But I don't think it's invisible, because I think what it is subtle. Lettering is subtle, where what it's doing and how it's affecting the reader isn't really noticed until we want to get your attention. And we often get your attention through sound effects, through something wild in the design, but something that stretches our creative muscles to present you with, like, oh, wow. And when we can do that, it's great, but we don't have to do it all the time because then it gets noisy. You don't have to have like major sound effects on every page to be like, okay, I'm the greatest letterer. No, you just have to be able to convey the story. And when you want to be loud, you can be loud. You can get their attention. They can get that feeling. When, the Hulk punches Thor, you want to feel that moment. And I think in that sense, yeah, lettering isn't invisible. It's just, if it's done well, it's subtle when it needs to be subtle, and it captures your attention at the right moments when it needs to. And it sets the pace throughout the book. So it's necessary. It's what makes it a comic.
Interesting. So, does the experience of working in comics at this granular level, where you're very technical and looking at layouts and looking at letters and fonts and stuff like that, does it change your experience as a fan? Do you enjoy books the same way?
I think some letters who have been long in the game, they get a little jaded about it. Maybe that's in my future one day. But in actual fact, I'm a huge geek, and that's not changing anytime soon. Um, my favorite books growing up was X-Men, and I loved the old cartoon series, so I loved Gambit and Rogue and Jubilee. And as I started reading Peter David's X Factor, I got really into the character of Richter, because it's like, oh man, he kind of represents a lot of the thoughts and ideas I have. And then I joined VC and I started doing Marvel books. And one of the first books, Corey was kind enough to like hand off to me because I needed to start on some titles. Very first book was Excalibur, which features Jubilee, Gambit, Rogue, Richter, and I was so excited. I still can't describe how excited I was at that moment. I'm finally getting to letter characters I've always enjoyed reading. And I'm not only that, I get to read the story before anyone else. I get to see the finished book before the writer, artist, editor. I get to see it. It's kind of
Nice.
thrilling. And I mean, certain books I'm doing and I'm not as invested with the characters, but I can still do a good job of it and just approach it from a design perspective of like, what's an interesting challenge I can make of this? And how can I make a good book out of this? I can still do that. But most of the time I get really enthusiastic about what I'm lettering. Like, I was never, even when I was living in Japan, I was never really all that excited for Ultraman. But then they assigned Ultraman to me as a title to work on for Marvel. And oh my gosh, I just love doing those stories. I just love lettering those stories because I'm getting more and more invested in the characters as I go. So the process of lettering makes me more enthusiastic of the books I letter. But it also means I get so focused and so busy on those books, I don't really have a lot of time to like read a lot of comics on my own or get interested in books outside of the ones that I'm currently working on.
What's your favorite book that you've ever worked on? You've got like 200 titles under your belt now. That's a lot of books. Does any one stand out in your mind?
I would say just like a little diamond in the rough was this title called Flavor. It was for Image Books. It was like 6 issues, and then it got canceled in the second issue. But we managed to put out, I think, 6 issues before they told us it was canceled after the first issue came out. And we're like, okay, but we still have 6 issues done, so we get to publish those, and then that's it. But there was something magical with working with Tamra and the colorist and Hunter, the artist, that we had this great synergy going on. It had this cool kind of Ghibli cartoony feel because Tamra had put on this kind of watercolor texture over her lettering, except for the characters in the foreground who like were in a kind of cell shaded kind of look. So it felt like characters on an animated background, like an animated, like painted background. And the artist just had such a bold, like Hunter had such a bold style in the book that it was about food battles, I guess, like culinary showdowns in a way. And the way he would draw food was just like so vivid. And I remember that year when the title was getting launched, right before the first issue was getting launched, Tamra and Hunter and I all met at Emerald City Comic Con, and he was enthusiastic to see us. We were enthusiastic to see each other, and it just became a really special moment to me. It broke my heart that the title got canceled so quickly, but I think they were looking for another Chew, and it wasn't going to be that. So it just, yeah, it, as heartbreaking as that was, it's still something that's like, we still got a collected volume out of it. And it's like, I'm still proud of this. I'm happy I got to do this. So I'd say that, but there's so many titles I've worked on so far. Like, if you ask me, for example, what's the favorite thing I worked on 2 years ago, I would say it would probably be, what was it, the $6 Million Man in Japan, because I got to collaborate with my friend Zach Davison, who is a manga translator, and he translated parts of the English dialogue into Japanese. And then I got to letter that Japanese into the book because there were characters who were only speaking in either Japanese or Russian. And we weren't going to translate those parts because that was part of the feel for the $6 Million Man who did not know those languages. He would not know what they're talking about. So we got to enjoy that. And I even got to do sound effects in Japanese. So that was like super exciting. I put a lot of heart into that. And I got to work so close with the colorist on that one because we had some tight deadlines that we would just keep in contact with each other over DMs on Twitter. And I'd be like, Rosh, how's it going? He's like, hey, I sent you these 2 pages. He's like, yeah, I got them. And just so we can get them out on time. So that one is warm in my heart. This year, I got to work with Zach Davison again, but this time it was for Demon Days by Peach Momoko. I got to letter that. It was Demon Days X-Men, and coming out soon is Demon Days Mariko. And this time, instead of translating things into Japanese, he's taking Peach Momoko's story for Mariko and translating it into English and providing it dialogue. He's basically writing the story, but based off what Peach Momoko wants for the story to be. And it's kind of cool getting his scripts and knowing he's my friend that I play Magic the Gathering with on every other month or whatever, and I'm getting to letter over Peach Momoko's art is an interesting challenge because she does everything not digitally, but she's doing watercolor and Copic on paper, and I want to be able to letter in a way that it does not look too unnatural to her work. So that's my current favorite right now.
That's amazing. When we had John Rochelle and DC Hopkins on the show, they were both talking about making their letters look and feel organic. And this is interesting to an outsider like me who doesn't have like a lot of professional experience doing this particular thing, because you wouldn't think that lettering would need to be unique, like on a per book basis.
It always depends on the nature of the book being put out. Like the majority of Marvel comics and DC comics that I'm lettering, they just want like a clean style to get the story out. Like superhero books tend to have nice, clean styles. And those are relatively easy to do. You create the bubble shape, you put the text inside, and so on. when it comes to more organic books, more like indie books and for different publishers, such as I did Firebug for Image, I think, and oh gosh, Prism Stalker was a big one I did too, and these were books where they didn't want a clean style. They wanted something to feel like it's a part of the artwork, that it's trying to convey what the artwork is trying to do. And that's when you have to like look at the art, look at the colors, look at the mood, and try to feel what feels organic to what the artwork is trying to do. So if it's a type of artwork that feels kind of sketchy, kind of raw, then you have to basically kind of hand draw through vector brushes or through Photoshop that kind of organic feel to the sound effects, where it looks like someone took pen to paper to put a sound effect onto the page. And if I can make the sound effect look not recognizable as a difference to what the artist did for a sound effect, that's awesome. But it's not always achievable. For Peach Momoko's work, I can't achieve the same manner of organic quality as for her sound effects in the book, because she writes them in Japanese. And for the script, I have to do them in English. But I try to give them an uneven line quality, and so that it does not feel too alien to what the artwork is trying to do. It's difficult. It's challenging in design, but it's also a thrilling part of our work when we're asked to do something a little more organic, a little bit more dirty and raw, something. And it comes down usually to balloons more so than fonts. Because a font, you can choose pretty kind of handwritten style looking fonts pretty easily. Or you can do it hand lettered, which you better be charging a lot more to do because that takes time. But it really comes down to balloons and balloon styles. You can change the color of the inside of the balloon, or you can change how the outline is drawn. You can change the shape of the balloon. You can change how the tail goes. Instead of like a kind of sharp, clean edge, it's just like this kind of waverly little thing that goes across the page. You can make these little decisions to make things a little bit unusual, a little bit not part of the norm. And the reader will adapt to it because the letterer is going to be consistent with that style throughout the whole book. So no matter how odd the lettering is, the reader will pick up on it after they know, okay, this is the language the book is talking to me in. This is the visual language.
Sure.
So yeah, it's an interesting challenge. It's a cool one.
That's neat. It just sounds like such a fantastic and fun job, the way you describe it.
I'm not gonna lie, it is fun. it's fun, but you have to be a particular kind of person to enjoy it. And I think it's a fun for the type of artists who are designers, because there's a lot of comic artists out there who they love every part of putting together a comic, and then they get to the lettering stage and they're like, ugh. And that's usually how I end up getting work.
It's just so much more complicated than I would instinctively think it would be.
I think it's always an evolving process too, because I used to think, oh, I've been doing this for this number of years. I think I've learned everything I need to about this. And then the next thing I know, I'll get a project that I'll have to rethink how I do a lot of things to be like, how do I achieve that idea that they've got right now? And once I started embracing the fact that I'm always going to be learning, I'm always going to be trying out new techniques and trying to refine this, it's gotten a lot easier for me to just like accept it and let myself learn. Especially the past year, even in the past few months, I've taught myself a few new techniques that I didn't know Illustrator could do. And when I figured it out, I'm like, oh, I can use this. And then I've adapted a whole new system of doing a certain thing that saves me like 10 to 20 minutes at a time. It ends up being exciting discovery every time. Even when it's something little, like really small, I'll turn to my boyfriend and be like, "Oh my gosh, I just figured out this thing that does this and this, and that way I can do this, and it's going to be so much easier." And he'll just look at me like, "Yeah, that's cool."
Yeah. Yeah. No, I know that feeling all too well, unfortunately.
Yeah, he'll find a
Uh,
cool one. I teach him how to do it because he puts together his own comic book stories too, and so it's like I'll lean over him and be like, "Okay, here's how you do the letter."
nice. At least you're willing to teach him, though. That's the cool thing about it.
Yeah, it's more fun to teach someone how to letter instead of just doing the lettering myself sometimes. I wish I had the time to just like be a consultant to people, and be like, okay, let me show you how to letter. And you can see just how fun it can be if you just make it easier for yourself. And there's a few certain things they can do here and there that can make the lettering process easier. You just got to find the right method to approach it with. But yeah, for now, I'm just lettering a lot of books and hoping I can, get by.
Neat. Do you have a favorite artist or creative team to work with?
Oh, jeez. It it's hard to say. There's tons. It just depends on, like, I really enjoyed the time I worked with Tamara and Hunter on Flavor because it was just a really good energy we had. I also really loved working with Johnny Christmas and Tamara on Firebug because it was my first proper experience with putting together a graphic novel as opposed from issue to issue, just like we're going to make a graphic novel. And it was difficult and it was exciting. And their art and story and colors coming together was like so thrilling for me. But like now I really loved working on Demon Days with Zach and Peach Momoko and the editor Lindsay, because it's just like what we're making is something genuinely cool. And like when you see the finished product, it's just, oh, cool. We made something really neat together and I feel great. Um, it's hard to say. Like I get to talk to people like Marcus Toe for Excalibur and stuff and just be really excited because he did a sound effect in a book that's coming out next week. He drew it in, and I just had to reach out to him and be like, "Oh my gosh, I love that thing you did." And he's like, "Are you sure I'm not taking your job away?" He's like, "No, no, no, do that. It's so good." Um, I don't know. It's just everyone has a cool, different feel to it. I really like working with Andrea Shea, the editor for Crush and Lobo. She's just a really great editor because she's always full of praise. And I know that sounds egotistical. It's like, oh, she pats me on the head. It's like, it's really a breath of fresh air when an editor turns around and be like, wow, great job. And I'm like, thanks. I needed that today.
That is so
And
cool.
it's easier to direct me to do new things if she's like, I like that, but you can do even more. And it's like, I'll do even more then.
Yeah, that is really neat. It's nice to be around people who have people skills there. It really helps.
Oh, a thing I learned in entertainment industries, like working at Nintendo, you'd often see online there'd be gamers and stuff who'd be like, Nintendo doesn't even like games, or the people who make Nintendo games don't understand games. And it's like, I've met the people both in Japan and here in the States in Nintendo, and man, I know one guy in Japan who put in like 1,000 hours playing Splatoon. I know so many QA testers that get every single game as soon as it comes out and play the heck out of it. Like these people love games, but they're often perceived as, just putting in the hours because, um, you know, people who consume the entertainment think that the people who make the entertainment are not as enthusiastic as they are. I find with comics too, it's like a lot of people understand that people who make comics really enjoy making comics. And that's a lot easier to convey than with the video game industry. But every once in a while, you'll still have people who are like, oh, Marvel did this, Marvel did that. And it's like, no, Marvel isn't this singular entity. It's a bunch of people who made a lot of thoughts and decisions together, and you either are success or fail on it. But they're doing it out of love of their work. Like a lot of people are just enthusiastic for their job, especially editors. Man,
Oh yeah.
they're like a they're like a huge backbone to this industry, and I feel like every editor should get cover credit for all the work they put into things because they have to steer the whole ship. They have to herd every single cat to make the book go.
Oh yeah. Like one time, I talked to Tom Brevoort, and it amazed me that he has been in this industry for what, like 30 years, and he still lives and breathes it. He is still excited to get out of bed in the morning and go work at Marvel.
I mean, it's cool. Like I grew up with these characters. It's okay. It's really funny because my very first comic book was Uncanny X-Men 303, which was the death of Ilyana Rasputin. It was a '90s book, and had Jubilee and Jean Grey coping with the passing of Colossus's younger sister Ilyana, who becomes magic, and it was my first time reading a comic book, and it hooked me from the beginning. And I just remember how much I enjoyed reading it. And I had really enjoyed the lettering too. And then I found out that it's my boss, Chris, who lettered that issue. We kind of teased him about it. Because then Clayton would talk about what his first comic book was. And then Corey would talk about what his first comic book was. And we all came into comics in slightly different times, but we were all enthusiastic for comics in our own way. And it's even if it's just something as minute as like how books are lettered, when I see really good lettering for a comic, I just get so excited. And then I think, how can I do that? How can I do that in my own way? It's such an exciting industry. It's so creative. It's so fun. And you get to meet some really cool people along the way. It's just, it can be really difficult too because there's no support network for it. Everyone's freelancers for the most part, and it can be really difficult to fly without a net. But, you're still flying, so that's pretty great too.
Hey, did you want to do the active fan questions, or did you want to skip those?
Are there active fan questions?
Yes, I
What are
have
those like?
several of them. Oh, those are
Oh,
fun.
wow.
Yeah,
Okay, I'd love to.
awesome. So, do you have a favorite story of all time?
Favorite story of all time?
Mhm.
Oh, geez, favorite story of all time. Oh gosh, this is difficult. So many stories are running through my head right now. Mm, e- oh gosh, I would say there's a story in Peter David's X Factor about Richter, and this is a point where he's depowered. And there's this ultra powerful mutant that comes in and basically beats up the whole team. And Richter, even though he's basically just human at this point, he no longer is a superpowered mutant who can control earthquakes and such. He's just a guy hanging out with a bunch of mutants because he's a former mutant and he's battling his own depression and anxiety and all that stuff. He faces down this super powerful mutant and finds a way to kick his butt by outsmarting him. And that was my favorite story. I think it was called, I don't know, Heart of Ice or something like that. It was somewhere in the middle of the Peter David series. But I just read that one. I was like, man, that's cool. Because you see mutants
Nice.
be powerful all the time, but seeing a mutant without his abilities anymore just be smart and outthink someone was nifty. I'll say that one's my favorite.
Cool. When was the last time a comic made you cry?
It was Marvel Voices Pride about a few weeks ago. It was two stories in Marvel Voices Pride. One was about Iceman and another one was about Prodigy, and they both made me cry. It was, oh man, especially the one for Prodigy by Kieran Gillen. Oh god, I cried so hard. It just meant a lot to me, that one. It spoke to my experience as a person in such a way that I never thought would be spoken to me before in a mainstream comic book. Yeah. So yeah, that one.
Is there someone that stands out in your mind as either the most underrated or most inspiring comics creator you can think of?
Let me think about this one. Uh, I mean, he's highly rated in the circles of comics creation, so it might not be the right answer. But when it comes to just overall readers, reviewers, people in the industry, they may not like note his work as often. But Aditya Bidikar, the he's a letterer. He's done a lot of DC books recently, like Batman and stuff. Before that, he did tons of really great indie titles. He's currently the letterer for Giga, and one of his first works that I noticed his work in was Graffiti's Wall by Ram V. His lettering is, in my mind, the current best in the industry. Just the way he approaches things can be very organic and real and perfect for that moment in time. Like his most recent stuff in Swamp Thing. I just, whenever I think I'm a pretty good letterer, I see his work and it's like, dang, I can't do that. Only he can do that. And I just look at my own work and it's like, I can't do what he does, but I'm just going to do it my own approach. I'll just be known as someone who does clean, clear work that just gets the job done, and I'll be happy with it. But like when I see his work, it's like, oh man, that's awesome. So yeah, Aditya's work.
That is so cool. So it looks like we're heading up against the end of the show. Are you ready for the fun part?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Cool. So I'll start with an easy one. What's your favorite food?
Takoyaki, but I feel bad about eating octopus, so I usually like it when they replace the octopus with ham and cheese.
Would you say you're a cat person or a dog person?
I get along with cats, but most of my family's allergic, so I've always liked dogs more. And it's my goal to hopefully have a dog soon. I want to adopt one maybe someday soon. I just really need to get my driver's license first, just so, in case I need to take them to the vet. So, dogs.
So where do you find your zen?
Where I find my zen?
Mm-hmm.
Um, right in my studio. It's doesn't get direct light too much, but it's just enough for my plants to be happy. And it has a kind of nice gray look to it, and I find it very calming color. So when I come into the morning and I'm in the studio and it's just the light coming in from the window, I don't have the lights on in the studio. I just use the window light. It's just nice and calm.
That's amazing. What inspires you?
Um, the moment that I get script and artwork and I get to start on a book, I get really excited because it's the start of either of like reuniting with a familiar friend. I worked with them the script and art last month and I'm coming back and I know what to do, or I'm trying out something entirely new and I'm exploring something new and creative. So like the moment that I get the script and the artwork is the moment I get started, and that's pretty exciting for me. It inspires me.
So you've got one wish to save the earth. What is it?
Mm. bringing down the capitalist system and rebuilding something new.
Oh, yeah. That would be a good one.
I just think patenting vaccines was a bad idea. That's all.
Terrible
I could
idea.
deal with some university here. I'm just saying.
You are awesome, by the way.
Thank you.
So what's next for Ariana Maher?
I will happily do this job and this position for as long as they'll have me. I'm doing exactly what I want, where I want. Where my future takes me isn't trying to excel to any other place career-wise. I'm happy here. And everything else I'm exploring personally. I'm planning to get married soonish. I have a wonderful partner. My brother is going to be moving out here to my city soon. And so my family connections get to grow. I'm having a lot of cool milestones ahead of me as a person, more so than a career. And I'm really happy about that.
Awesome. Well, Ariana, I wanted to thank you for taking the time to spend with me on my humble little podcast. Thank you for coming by.
Here. I'm looking forward to going back and listening to all your episodes, especially the Tom Brevoort one, since I have to letter so many of his books.
He's a great guy. He's just so much fun. Awesome. So where can people find you online?
I only have my online portfolio at arianamaher.com. And then my only social media is Twitter. You can find me at Comment Airy, so COMMENTAIRY on Twitter. So, commentary. Airy. Airy is my nickname.
Love
so
it.
Yeah. I'm on there on Twitter. And also, if anyone ever has like questions about lettering, or they want to get into the industry, or if they've got their lettering portfolio together and they just need to find some work, they can just reach out to me. I keep a running recommendations list for people who reach out to me for projects that I can't fit into my schedule, or I don't think I'm the right fit for. I can help them find the right person for them.
It is really cool that you do that. That is really neat.
I mean, it really helps me a lot for the most part, because I always feel bad saying no to things. So I'll say yes to a bunch of things and overwork myself. So I found that the best answer is to say no, but let me recommend someone to you. And then everyone's happy.
And now it's time to close the show. Imagine it. The lights beginning to come on in an empty theater. People starting to get up from their seats. The smell of popcorn crushed on the floor. And the thought runs through your head that Titular Characters is awesome, and you want to support it. Fear not, my friends. There are tons of ways to do it. You can follow Eva at Eva is Adorable on Twitter. You can leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, Castbox, or Podcast Addict. And if you're feeling super generous, you can leave some dough at buymeacoffee.com/Eva is Adorable. There, you can contribute as little as $1. And every bit goes towards paying for production and hosting of this show. How cool is that? Titular Characters is a show about the things we love. It is produced and hosted by the adorable Eva Webb. Opening theme by Antonia Marquis. Closing theme by Mikey Flash of Speed Force Music. The dreamy announcer guy who reads the credits is Donnie Underwood. That's me. Join us next time for another death-defying adventure in cyberspace. See you then.